Okay, so Jonathan, the president says the ceasefire is over and we're probably going to be striking them again hard tonight. What's your big takeaway?
Well, a couple of things here. I mean, President Trump has threatened this before, and we have not followed through. We know he's issued deadlines and backed away.
Taco War Edition.
Many times. This one feels a little different. It was real strikes last night. There was a significant number from the Department of Defense advisors, and Iran hit back. U.S. assets in the region. The president forecasting that more coming this evening. But at the same time, he also said negotiations could continue, that his advisors, this means Witkoff and Kushner, could keep talking with their Iranian counterparts. Now, it's unclear what sort of negotiations are even having in the first place, but once again, he's leaving the door open to diplomacy, but that doesn't change the fact that as long as Iran exerts control over the Strait of Hormuz, and that's what precipitated this violence in the last couple of days, this is going to keep happening.
Listen, he must have said the word deal. I'm a deal man. I'm a deal maker. Dozens of times. We do not have a deal. And even this ceasefire, was it ever really a ceasefire, since it seems like that was never the case?
I think that's a great question. I mean, definitionally, this was very curious from the beginning. Yes, this was a major series of attacks last night, but we've seen the kind of back and forth between the U.S. and Iran for many weeks now. And I should say we're very far into this 60-day period. And to Jonathan's point, unclear sort of what progress has been made. A criticism from the get-go here has been that there wasn't the kind of technical expertise that this administration needed to come to some kind of subsequent deal to this memo of understanding. I got no indication that we're there. He loves a deal in principle. He wanted to sign a deal. He wanted to sign that memo of understanding as quickly as he could. But we knew from the get-go here that the level of work, the amount of work that was going to have to go into getting something that was more comprehensive was going to be something that would exhaust him and, as he said, disinterest him.
Also, just because it's a deal does not mean it is a good deal. And Donald Trump has a long history of bad ones in his professional career.
Right. And, you know, The Art of the Deal, his bestseller from the 1980s, was a nonfiction work of fiction about his history as a deal maker, which was littered with mistakes. He lacks the emotional, intellectual discipline to be a good deal maker. And in this case, it's not just Trump being performative, you know, on TV, on The Apprentice, or giving interviews to magazines. He's sitting in the middle of a geopolitical conflict that he is mired in, and he has no good options. And to actually be able to negotiate well in any deal, you have to have chips at the table. And he really doesn't have any right now. I think the Iranians, the missile strikes for both sides are essentially performative. It's not going to bring either one of them to the table. The Iranians have already indicated they can withstand a lot of brutality in order to make sure the United States doesn't get its goals met in Iran or in the region. And Trump is angry because the memo of understanding that both sides wrote and agreed to is cloudy. It's nebulous. It's not directional. So there's really nowhere to go here. He's in a very bad place. He started a war he shouldn't have. He's got no good options to extricate himself from it. And when he jabbers about being a good deal maker and wanting to get a deal done, it is all dross because he doesn't have the chips to get a good deal engineered.
You know what else he's going to be angry about? The fact that the market is down 500 this morning. Oil prices are up. He does not control oil prices, nor does he control, nor do we control the Strait of Hormuz. But what was your takeaway about what he said about Patriot missiles, right? To me, this was a much friendlier meeting with Zelensky than we've seen in the past.
Yeah, a few notes on this. First of all, let's remember that Oval Office dust-up of a year ago, February, where President Trump and Vice President Vance berated Zelensky for not being appropriately grateful. I was counting because we took
or appropriately dressed, in their words. Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend gave him a hard time
gave
about
him a bit of a lecture.
Yes.
I was counting. I believe Zelensky said the words "thank you" 7 times in his opening statement in their first initial reaction to the
Were there more thank yous or more deals?
Yeah, more thank yous, but he's learned his lesson there. The Patriot missiles deal. This would be Trump floated the idea of allowing Ukraine to have a contract to build Patriot missiles. That would be significant if it happens. That's a long way off from actually becoming reality. And we know talking points from the White House sort of detached from the situation on the ground, suggesting that Russia's still doing well in this war when all evidence points to the opposite. And even in this news conference, Trump repeatedly, he said Putin was difficult, but he also praised him at times. He made a point of saying that Zelensky was difficult as well. Yes, relations with Zelensky are warmer than they were, but there's still, significant obstacles to peace. And there's no sense that Trump is going to go all in on Ukraine like his predecessor Biden did.
No offense to the three of you, but to the audience, we have saved the best for last. Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut joins the group chat now.
Who said no one anywhere ever.
Well, except in this room right now. Here we are putting you on the spot. You just sat down 2 seconds ago. What do you make of everything that is playing out as Donald Trump tries to continue to sort of dominate the world stage?
Yeah, so I mean, the discussion I think was pretty accurate. I might take some issue as to whether Biden did everything that could have been done. I think one of the reasons we're in this situation in Ukraine is because the Biden administration should have done a lot more. But more importantly, I was in Ukraine 5 weeks ago, and it is a very different feeling there right now because they're winning. Now I don't mean they're winning like they're going to retake all the territory they've lost, but they are inflicting unbelievable casualties on the Russians. I mean, they are losing in 2 months. Russia's losing in 2 months what we lost in 13 years of the Vietnam War in terms of killed in action. And the Ukrainians are retaking territory, and they're setting off explosions in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, something we hadn't seen before. So what does the president see? The president sees that the guy that he humiliated in the Oval Office when he was losing, because we know how President Trump feels about losers, is now winning. So surprise, surprise, you're going to see President Trump sidle up to the guy that he thinks is actually on the march right now.
But you think he's actually going to turn his back on Vladimir Putin? Because we've seen no evidence of that over the last 10 years.
Well, yeah. I mean, is he all of a sudden going to say what we all know to be true, which is that Putin is a war criminal and a terrorist? No, he's not going to say that. But again, he's going to hedge his bets. He wants to be on the winning side of everything. And, I don't know that it's mattered to him all that much that in the last year people have said on an ethical basis, standing with Putin and against the Ukrainian people on this one is a bad idea. I think he just sees that the Ukraine is, to use his terminology, they've now got a few cards to play. And so he's hedging his bets.
Let me ask you about the situation in Iran, because you are the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee. You had to fight to get details of that MOU. At this point, what's the value of it? Where do you see things going? I mean, the president just said this morning he may look to hit Iran hard tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I read that MOU 6 times, and I mean, it is a terrible deal, as I knew it would be. I mean, it basically gives the Iranians a $300 billion fund. Yes, that doesn't appear to be taxpayer money, but still, it's $300 billion. It, gives them pretty much everything they wanted, and there's nothing in that MOU that is for us other than Iran agrees to stop attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz and has this weird thing that they will respect their neighbor's sovereignty and, maybe negotiate a deal down the road. I'll pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today, right? But what's happening today, and you're seeing it in the market, and believe me, President Trump is seeing it in the market, is that the Iranians right now, they may not have a navy. They don't have a navy. Hegseth can pound his chest on that all he wants. But the Iranians are in control of the chessboard because, as we're seeing today, watch what happens to oil prices. I think they're up $8 a barrel. The stock market is down 500 points. This is testimony to the fact that Donald Trump got us into a position where the Iranians are controlling the strategic direction.
Talk about that, David, because here we go. Market down 500. The president has been, he's literally been pressuring local gas stations to cut the price of gas. We do not have control over the Strait of Hormuz. We do not have control over our oil and gas companies. 2 days ago, he was praising Walmart, saying they were a great patriotic company because they lowered the price of Coca-Cola and beef. This is a totally different situation. And it was gas prices that actually are the reason he did everything possible to, he did everything he could to try to end the war. It was gas prices. It was never nuclear capabilities.
It's the one thing that he can't jawbone. And so, yes, we're seeing the broader market down today. But, he's been on a tear suggesting the Justice Department's going to investigate the major oil producers because of where they have prices, gas refiners as well. He can't bring it down. And I think he recognizes the fact that the political costs of that are going to be huge going into the midterms as well. To your point, he can't jawbone it. He has no control over the situation there. And what's the specter that has been haunting the Strait of Hormuz for those who are piloting these ships, owning these ships, is that there could be mines there. They could be subject to attacks. And in that very thin, concise memo of understanding, there's very little guarantee that that's going to be clear or clean. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, it hasn't been. Ships are still being hit. There could still be mines there. I think a lot of companies rightly are questioning whether or not it's safe to bring those ships through, and that's why we haven't seen the kind of flow that we saw before the war.
And we have seen Iran every so often decide to menace ships that have tried to come through, saying you have to use the corridor that we approve or you will be subject to attack. And it's almost like they're sort of flexing their muscles as a reminder here that our leverage has improved, that they have, to use your phrase, to use the Congress using the president's phrase, they have cards to play. And that they're not that interested in a deal, that they're going to push this off to as long as they can. And the hardliners in Tehran are clearly empowered. So the question now is, what is the president going to do about it? Is he actually going to resume significant hostilities? I think there's a lot of skepticism about that because he has so desperately avoided that to this point, and the midterms are only approaching.
Congressman, the president is getting what he wants. Well, I shouldn't say that. The president, our NATO allies have increased their defense spending. That is originally what he was banging on about over and over. So people should be thrilled about that. Yet he continues to bash them. So is something productive actually happening with this meeting, or are they just trying to appease him and get out of Turkey?
Yeah, I think we've long passed the point where jawboning, to just use the term of the day, is going to alter behavior. You know, he really picked hard on Spain, and he ordered the Treasury Secretary to stop all trade, and maybe we're not going to even visit Spain. That's going to have a backlash in Spain. We're already seeing this with Canada, right? It's going to have a backlash there, where there's going to be stuff that happens that hurts the American consumer out of Spain, whether it's olive oil or whatever it might be. But no, we're look. They say about Donald Trump, he sometimes asks the right questions, and he absolutely asked the right question about NATO allies, and why are you not spending your obligated percentage on defense? But we've reached the point where what he's doing is he is destroying the one massive strategic advantage we have over China, which is our allies. China's pretty darn good militarily, not nearly as good as we are, but they're catching up fast. And the one thing we can say we've got is allies who defended us after 9/11, who are there with us, and now he is unraveling that. Talk about doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. Putin could never have imagined that he'd get a Christmas gift like a U.S. president who is questioning the value of NATO.
In particular, by once again renewing his threats about Greenland.